Welcome back to the Dungeons and Dyslexia. My name's Adrian. Today I'm going to be taking my look at Mythic Britain, which is an expansion for Mythras, or as some people call it, 6th edition RuneQuest. It's kind of a little bit more than that. So Mythras is a game that I picked up and discovered a while back. I've done a review of it and I'll link it at the end of this video that actually blew me away with the combat rules and the special maneuvers and stuff that you can do in there. In essence, it's a D100 roll under. That's pretty much all you need to know for this video. But actually, several years ago, I was looking at Mythic Britain, which is this book here over at my left shoulder, and I was like, I don't know much about Mythras, so can I really pick this up? And I've really wasted several years of my life because it's bloody fantastic. It's a really good book. It's based in between the sort of 4th and 5th century here in the United Kingdom. And it's a time just after Arthur Pendragon has died. The Romans have left Britain, and the Celts and the Saxons are trying to establish their own country throughout, kind of disliking each other, mainly because, different religious backgrounds, different gods. There's an awful lot in here about superstition. It plays a very big part of the game. But this is a world setting, and it's expanded on with the Amorica expansion that you can see here, and there's the Logris one as well. So it's going to be quite a big and growing world. But today I'm just going to focus on Mythic Britain, go through what's included in the book. As ever, I'll show you where to pick it up initially. But the other thing that this book does brilliantly is it's actually got a really good campaign setting. There's 7 parts of the campaign. You can play them individually, or they do link to be this wonderfully epic campaign, traveling around Britain, discovering loads of historical things that are in there, as well as specific, I think it's 13 magic items or legendary items that are in there. They're going to interact with Merlin. There's going to be interactions with other people that from Merlin legends that you will have heard. Guinevere's right at the start. As I do with all these, let me just take you through to the RPG link. So you can, again, this is quite a nice summary of the book as well. So you can just pick up the PDF. The physical copy is available a variety of places. I actually picked mine up on Amazon, but if you want just the PDF, you can get it from RPG. The book is by Design. Is that Mechanism? I think that's how it's pronounced. It is 362 pages, and I am kind of conscious that some of my longer books, the videos can go out for an hour, so I'm going to try and keep this to a little bit shorter than I do with these sort of longer books, if that makes sense. But yeah, so give you the summary here. It's got Mythic Britain, a complete source book for adventuring in Dark Ages Britain using the RuneQuest rules or Mythras rules. It's going to give you complete character creations for Saxons and Britons, detailing magic, saints, pagan gods, mass rule for combat. Yeah, you can do the full shield wall and take the combat from armies, and it just breaks down and says it's got the 7 scenarios in here. You're going to interact with Merlin, Arthur, Guinevere. It's there is a lot in these books. It is written by Lawrence Whitaker, who I spoke to him after doing my Mythras review, and he said he's going to send me a couple more books. So that's quite exciting. So as soon as those land, I'll go through those as well. But I say I have got the America book that I will be looking at some stage in the future as well. So let's just get over and look at the book. And now this front cover is amazing. It actually feels really nice as well. So let me actually just scroll back to me quickly so you can kind of see it's a good size book. And on the map you've got this amazing you've got this amazing map here of ancient Britain with a load of historical locations on. So I'd say, as someone from the island, it's really nice when people do things based on the history of my country. Well, it's not my country, but you know what I mean. One day it might be my country. It's never going to be my country. So right, let's get into the front cover. So you've got, which I assume this is Merlin. It could be any sort of druid, but you kind of get the assumption it's Merlin. And then you've got this sort of Saxon character in the background here. So it's RuneQuest role-playing game, so it's Mythras in essence. It is hyperlinked, and the content is nicely laid out. The book runs well as well, because it gives you a brief introduction to the book. We're then going to take you through the history and an overview. The kingdoms of Britain. This is really detailed. The only bit it doesn't cover is the longest book, but I'll show you that in the maps. But also, it covers the tribes that are in there, some locations, an idea of what's going on in the area, so the sort of drive, how they feel about the other tribes. It's really, really in depth. You're then going to get into more detailed about the Celtic life as well as society, Mythic Britain characters, specific characters like Arthur that the players may or may not come across. But depends if whether you do the adventure. Obviously, you don't have to run the adventure. You can just run this book. You know, there's so many adventure hooks in here. Then it's going to talk about the gods, religion, and magic, Britain at war. Then we get into the Mythic Britons. Then you're going to get into the campaign. So pretty much half the book is sort of character creation, backgrounds, lore, mass combat rules. And then you've got this whole second book, which is the campaign. And it's broken down then into the 7 chapters. And you're away then, you know, index and bibliography. The introduction basically covers, you know, what is Celtic life like and the history of Britain. You know, so I'll summarise it realistically. So Britain, for centuries, had been taken over, most of it, by the Romans. And to keep the northern tribes away, they built a wall, which is called Hadrian's Wall, which is covered in this book. And this is at the end when the Romans have actually left. The Romans left several years beforehand, and Britain is finally now finding its way. Throughout that, because this is more of a mythic form of Britain, then we are going to get this story here about Othel Pendragon, Merlin, how his son dies, etc. So it's just going to sort of bring you through with a fair bit of reading, say Arthur Pendragon, which is Arthur, or King Arthur as he becomes, that is his father. And so it's just going to take you through all through that, and then you've got this wonderful timeline. So if you be honest, if you're not into reading full stories, you can actually gather a load here, you know, absolutely perfectly. So here we've got the Romans starting to leave, sort of, it's about 100, it's what is it, 150, 200 years just before this campaign setting is set, because the idea is you are running it at sort of 495 AD. And then it's going to carry on for the rest of the sort of adventure, of the background to the campaign, and really how Merlin came into his own with the Druids, and how then Christianity sort of came to the country. I think it's fair to say most people are aware that Druids are pagans and Christianity is a different religion. And and if you're not, this book will take you into enough details. It keeps you into that and gives you enough information as a games master, and even as a player. It doesn't matter if you read most of this up to the adventure as a player, but there are clearly this religious divide that is here in the country, and I just love the way this is built. And from it, okay, it's not completely historical, but it does talk about, you know, it's based in history, and you can see there's an awful lot of research that's gone into this, because we ended up in what was called the Dark Ages. So we think back to the time of the Romans, you know, they had aqueducts, heated baths, things like that. Once they left, we kind of went back into what we call the Dark Ages, sort of living back in mud huts, and may or may not have things to do with the religions that came through, Christianity, the Druids and things like that. You know, there are recent discoveries. I was watching something the other day about it, and they're now thinking it's probably not as dark from the historical ages as we now call it going forward. But that doesn't matter. This is the setting. And we're going to open up really with the Kingdoms of the Mythic Britain, which is, so you've got the full colour one of this at the back of the book. But what we're looking at is everything other than this Logris, I think that's how it's pronounced, which is the Saxon area. It does cover Saxons in general in this book, but it really doesn't cover what is Anglia, and becomes East Anglia and Mercia, which is the centre here of England now. But we are looking at Middle Britain, Western Britain, South Britain, Northern Britain, where the Picts live. So we have got the Omerica book as well, which is a separate book, which I'll go through. I have got the Logris book as PDF, so maybe I'll cover that at some stage too, so you can just see what you're going to get in here. But you can see it's all broken down into counties, or it's almost divided by tribe. Some of the tribes do mix, but we're going to go through this and we're going to talk about the initial setting. Here is Middle Britain, which was the middle section, and the Brigantes are the main tribe, so they are the most dominant tribe that cover, say, you can see quite a lot of Britain. And this is a really handy map, because this is the one that actually divides it up by tribes. Okay, so there is obviously a little bit of crossover, but humans in general, throughout history, we are a tribal nation. Well, we are tribal people, and it's going to each the tribes. It will then tell you their culture, their particular dress and customs, allies and enemies. It's going to give you some specific NPCs to use. There's no real stats for them, but it's going to tell you what they do, their motivations. Say we've got, it's broken up with a fair bit of artwork. There's not as much artwork as I think some people will want to see. From a reading point of view, I love the fact that it's very consistent in titles. Some of these that are a little bit harder to read, and I think that's just me as dyslexic, because they're not words that we're used to seeing, if that makes sense. You know, this looks very sort of, well, Welsh in a way, but it is, or from what I can work out, sort of an old English. But it's going to give you so much information. So we've then got the Great Wall here, Hadrian's Wall, as we now call it, or what's left of it. Say the Romans built this Great Wall just to keep the north out. I'm trying not to sort of, well, what I intend to do in these videos is kind of read out sections, and I don't want to do that, because this is sort of like 60-70 pages of tremendous information. So it's going to give you an idea of gods and spirits in here as well. So all the art in the book so far, I think, and apart from there might be a couple that may be colour, but I think most of it is black and white. But it's just going to, as a games master, you're going to get all the information you're going to need to run this. Okay, and now we're going to get into southern Britain, and I think for most people southern Britain might be one of the more interesting of areas, because we have got this is Daemonia, and we've got the four chieftains, but more importantly, this is where Arthur Pendragon was and where Arthur is going to be living. But really, it's up to you. You know, you say you don't have to run the campaign. But one of the reasons I would run the campaign is obviously it's going to make the setting a little bit easier. But one of the campaign settings does have this, it's going to take you through the mass combat rules and encourage you to use them. So we're now at Powys, which is modern day Wales, which is close on to where Arthur lived as well. We've got a little bit of details here about Logres, which is the kingdom of the Saxons, but there's not a lot in here. I think it's because obviously, if as a player, if you want to play a Saxon, you can, but it's kind of very much leaning towards playing a Celtic background. But by all means, you can play one. The next chapter is going to then take you through Celtic life and society. So who were the Celts, which are originally, well, they're basically Greek. They were kind of chased across the whole of Europe by the Romans, then finally settled here in Britain, and more prominently in Scotland, eventually and Ireland. And that's really the origin of the Celts, and it's just going to take you through the background. Land ownership, which is really interesting actually, because the land is owned by the tribe. It's not actually owned by individuals, so they all sort of work it together. Different types of personalities you're going to get. The 5 aspects of character: so devotion to the tribe, conformity to tradition, honour and prowess, which includes things like accept hospitality gracefully when it's offered, accept no insult, go and slap people if they're horrible to you, never harm a druid, show no fear. So it's going to give all the players a idea of how to play the characters, blood vengeance, and then a clean and honest death. I think that's quite clear how the players want to play a count, how they're going to run their counts, and how they should be playing their characters. Section here about children and infant mortality, which is a little bit sad, because the people didn't live very long back then. I think around about 40 was considered quite elderly, or like really old, and children became men around about 12, 13. Different roles of women and men, and the clothing they wore, tattoos, Details about warriors. Every male in the tribe is expected to fight and be a warrior. The love and marriage section is very in-depth. I was amazed just how much goes into the marriage and the 9 steps that the couple goes to complete the sort of wedding circle that they have. Housing, property, details about the round houses that most people lived in, the Great Hall where the chieftain lived, and the feasts that they'd have. So we're then talking about fortified settlements and hill forts, personal possessions and tools. There's just so much in here. The money section, despite not minting their own, Celts have a love of coin, especially gold and silver. Who doesn't? It's quite nice that, you know, obviously a lot of this has come out from, say, the historical finds and stuff. There's so much research has gone into here. Details then about the food and drink, trade, culture, metalworkings, and sort of sacred numbers that they have. Literacy and numeracy. So Celtic tradition is largely oral because, well, we had it with Christianity as well, is that basically most religious heads knew language, where nearly everyone else didn't really read and write. It just wasn't a thing that most people did. Games and sports, law and order, the 9 witnesses in law, which talks about, and then we've got the blood price in here. Typical crimes and punishments for it tells, you know, what you're going to get for things like adultery, burglary, murder, rape, treason, breaking an oath. So if you break an oath, reduction in social status by 1 level, or exile, depending on the oath and severity. You can elect trial by combat. So if someone says you are wrong, you can challenge them to combat, but the person is allowed, that's challenging you, is actually allowed to ask the tribal champion to step in to fight on their behalf. So it's something that I probably wouldn't do freely unless you're really good at combat. We've then got calendars and festivals, which I've recently discovered is something that I think as a games master you should keep on top of, as I've been terrible. Dates and calendars and weather are the 2 things that I'm really bad at. But it just allows you then to build in some of these festivals and what's going to happen in the festivals. The next chapter we're going to get is Mythic Britain characters. So this is character creation. Obviously, you're going to need a copy of the Mythras main rulebook, but this is just going to take you through the differences when you are creating your character. So when you detail in the culture and community, then the character culture can either be Celt or Saxon. Again, so following the main rules, you've got your homeland or tribe, the religion though, but this time you have to go Christian or pagan. The cultural skills, it's going to teach you, tells you which ones you have and which passions you're going to take. Your background events, it's got its own table in here to roll, which is really good because that's going to change from the main Mythras core rule book. And then we've got details of social class, family, rivals. Depending on whether you go Celtic culture or Saxon culture, will give you some customs, some law, standard skills, possessions, and more importantly, combat styles as well. And it kind of, there are bits in here where, you know, Celtic culture and Saxon culture are going to clash, but I don't think there's any reason why, as a games master, you couldn't allow people, especially the way the campaign is done. It does read to me that I think you could actually do it, but you might have to be a little bit careful, depending. It's going to be a lot easier if everyone just plays Celts, but there is no real reason why you couldn't play Saxons. There is a little box here that's actually going to make it really helpful if you're comfortable with the idea of slavery. Because if you're then going to allow both Celts and Saxons, what you could do to make it quite easy is, let's say you're going to predominantly have Celts in the game, and then you're going to have one person, a Saxon. You could make that Saxon a slave of the other, so we can have all the Saxon culture, background, skills, etc., but then have been caught later to be a slave, and then you just might want to make them a freed slave, if that makes sense, to because I'm not a massive fan of people being slaves actually within a game, but obviously historically, if that was part of their background, I think that's perfectly acceptable. But it depends on your group. You know, if you're quite sensible and you can run with one person being an actual slave to the others, then make it work how you want to make it work. That is the beauty of this hobby. Homelands and tribes. So depending on where you are, you're going to make some random rolls here for different kingdoms. They're going to be brought in, which is going to give you things like different languages and a potential for a different religion. So between the Christian and pagan. So if you want to just completely randomly roll it and not pick anything, you can. You know, it will just take you through the way you want it to be. So we've got some classes here. So we've got the outcast class, the churls, the freemen, the A's, and the right at the top is the nobles. And then we got the Saxon classes and ranks, and exactly the same, but they are in names I'm not going to try and pronounce. Well, I can go, well, Slave, Carl, Thane, Alderman, and High Noble. So yeah, it wasn't actually that bad. I just got this Weirgeld here, which actually that's the price, isn't it, that you can demand for killing someone in the family. Then get into the backgrounds, as we sort of teased on, and the following table serves for both Celt and Saxon backgrounds, so it doesn't make a difference. They're both rolling on the one, and there are 100 of them, so this is a genuine D100 roll, and it's going to give you different backgrounds other than the 100, which you're going to roll on this table twice, re-rolling if you get a 0-0 again. So let's just go with 95. One of your relatives killed a druid. This means your family is now cursed by the gods. If you are a Christian and you do not worship them, what form was the curse taken? How does it affect you? What must you do to lift it? That is going to... Oh dear, that's going to be quite a tough one to play, especially in the campaign, if they're aware that you killed a druid. We've then got these different career classes in here, and each one's going to pick 2 career classes. So if you pick the main one, warrior, it's going to allow you to pick a secondary career class off as well. But if you decide to go bard or druid, that is just going to be your career. Then we've got a few secondary career classes here, so things like entertainer, farmer, fisher, so stuff that you do outside. Talked about this earlier, superstition, which is the new skill in the game. And this does feel very much like it's going to be very important to the game, because Dark Ages were a time of superstition. You know, if you see a squirrel in a tree, is that just a chance, a squirrel in the tree? Or does it mean something? Has it got a greater meaning for the players in the campaign settings? This is where superstition's going to start coming in. And initially, your superstition score is going to be based on your int plus your POW. Money, starting money, equipment, armor, and other equipment. So it is going to have specific axes, daggers, etc. to this age. So we got these CX, I think it's pronounced, which is actually what the Saxons were named after, which is their sword that they had. Which and then you're going to get the special effects, which I don't. You know, I'm not going to worry about that. That's more of a Mythras core rulebook thing if you want to get into that. So video will be linked at the end. We've then got the armor that you can expect, and I think it's 4 pages, because it's 2 double pages of names for both Celtic men and women names in here. And then we got a load of Saxon ones as well. So it's always a difficult thing to come up with character names, especially if you want to try and stick on theme. So well done. Always a good thing to include. The Gods, Religion and Magic section is, like everything that we've seen so far in this book, is very much in depth. And it's going to open up with Christianity, give you an idea of some of the saints, and then some of the miracles. Miracles are basically just magic spells, and there's 3 different types of miracles that the game is going to sort of allow the players to do. So here we go. It says it's going to take 3 forms. It can either be immediate, so this is going to take directly through a prayer or something along those lines. It can be take a second form of a permanent gift. So it's obviously going to be something tangible. The third one is to invoke the name of a saint through prayer, and this works as per the dividend intervention in the book. So that is going to be a slightly more powerful but a harder thing to actually do. We're then going to look at the Celtic gods, Celtic pagan gods basically, and their magic, and it talks here a little about the mortal world, which is obviously the world the game is going to be based. And they also believe in the spirit world, which is Anwin, I think that is pronounced. And the spirit world consists of 3 realms. The other world, as has been discussed, as well as the realms of the Great Red Dragon and the Great White Dragon. All the details are in here about it, which is... so I thought I knew a little bit about Celtic religions and gods and beliefs, but I didn't know much. I was aware of they do like sacrificing, and sacrificing is part of this and part of the game, which I think some players will maybe like or dislike, especially this section here about head taking. The brain, even when the body is dead, contains a huge amount of knowledge, and yeah, is exactly how it sounds. You are going to be eating knowledge. So the druids, only of certain of the tribes, will eat the brains of their predators to take knowledge. And you get this table here, depending on what you roll will determine how well it goes. We've then got a list of, there's a lot. The Celtic gods are hundreds in nature, as it says, and there's a load of them. I've heard of Baal, But I haven't really heard of many Celtic gods. I'm aware of Mythras, which was one of the Roman gods, but I think that's purely because in Vampire the Masquerade he was one of the main vampires of England. He was one of the that's like really old early generation vampires. Celtic magic is here so it's basically just an adaptation of the Druid magic, but this is more going to be based around animalism in here for the players, as well as being able to talk to the spirits of the animals. There are a variety of sacred sites in Britain that the players can then cast spells near, and if they do, it's going to increase the power of the spell, and it's going to be a lot easier to cast spells from. He said there are over 1,300 stone circles across Britain, stretching the length and breadth of the country, as well as a really famous henge that is actually included here. And I don't think it's if I remember, it's not called Stonehenge. It's down here. It's 0.4 here. It's just called the Stones in this. Because technically it's not a henge, but we don't worry about that. It's just what it's called nowadays. But yeah, so you've got, 9 powerful sacred locations that the players can go to say cast spells or do more divination power. So here we've got the stones here, which is Stonehenge, which it's going to increase the magical strength by 100, which is I don't remember seeing anything higher than that. Then you've got this great image here of Stonehenge with these spirits above this druid at the bottom here. We've got 13 treasures of Britain. So let's just look at the chariot of some person. Mifwenwa? I don't know. I shouldn't have done this bit. This chariot rides across any terrain, including water, without jolting the driver. No enemy missile can pierce its side. And some of these, at least 2, appear in the main campaign setting if you're going to take the players through that. We then get the Saxon gods and magic. And some of this might sound incredibly familiar if you are a fan of Norse, because they talk about Aesir's, which the Saxons, like the Celts, believe that there is a separation between gods known as the Aesir and the land known as, but they call it Landiviter. I think that's how it's pronounced. But these gods are going to sound very familiar to, say, Norse fans. We've got Balder here. No gates with him. Frigga. Let's Hal, Jord, Loki, Sif, Scold, Tyre. Not Thor, though, because he's called Thunor. So, and then Woden, which is the Allfather. Now, I was not aware that, I always thought Saxon gods were slightly different to Norse gods. Every day's a school day. This is why I love about picking up sort of, I know it's a role-playing book, but in my 30-odd years in this hobby, the amount of information and things that I've learned that are useful, I say useful, in a, you know what I mean, when we find stuff. The stuff that, people talk about, that it's just, I don't know, it's always something I found interesting and fascinating, the sort of general knowledge that I've picked up. The Saxons' new magic is, I say new magic, it's animalism. This just slightly changes the animalism that's in the core rulebook of Mythras. So again, but it's called leech, but unrelated to blown sucking worms. It just specifically say in here. But yeah, so their magic and the spells are going to be pretty much exactly the same. So there isn't a lot to change in here. Just before we get into Britain at War, we've got an image here, which we're going to assume is Arthur picking up Excalibur out of the lake. But Britain at War is the wonderful section for mass combat rules, because here we've got the chunk here, just down in the column here that says Shield Wall. And this is going to allow you to do that wonderfully. I've had a little bit of a play with this, and I was quite impressed how it works. So key things to remember when you're doing your battle components: you've got force, which is the total amount of the army. Okay, then you've got a unit, which is a small, so it might be the archers, it might be the sword fighters, or something like sword fighters. Great wording by me. Then you've got the formation they're stood in, and that is going to affect how well they fight. Command, who is going to oversee normally a unit, might oversee the whole force, but if you think once the battle actually starts, if people are stood over quite far away, then there's no communications getting to them, which is why you want to kind of keep commanders within units. depending on how good their command skill will determine how well they it saves morale really in trying to get them to do things. Take you through the phases of the battle, which is a period of time, and then you've got each battle round, which is 15 seconds. Okay, so it should feel like normal combat, but it's on a grander scale. But because it breaks it down into units, you kind of think of units as a player. That's the way the way I've got it in my head. Or obviously, if you're going to be commanding the units, then the player is the commander. That's depending on really where you go. And then you've got battle actions. There's 2 full pages of battle actions in here. Formation is going to be one of the most important things, because depending on the formation, it'll determine what the players, or what the units can do. And because they could be broken running away. So they've got no traits at all. Their move up to sprint and speed effects cannot engage with anything. Engage is one of the keywords as you get into the combat. So we've then got line formation, phalanx formation, circling or encircling, or wedge formation if you're going to try and drive something through it. Units are then going to be assigned things like strength, morale, competence. So strength, how physically tough they are. Morale, how brave they are, how much damage they can take before they run away. Unit competence, how good they are at taking the command orders. And then finally, we've got unit frontage and depth. Frontage, because if you think about a unit, if you've got a load of people, let's just use this case. Okay, this is your unit. Everyone at the back here, unless you're an archer unit, can't attack. It's only this frontage bit that's going to be doing the damage. And this works through how much damage you do, and as it takes damage, you're going to be removing units, percentages of the units. If the player characters are in there as well, there's a chance they're going to get injured, and it will take you through all the roles in here. I'm going to talk about the phases of the battle. I love this first bit, choosing the grounds. So if you are not surprised, as the player characters or the leader, you can choose the ground. And we've got a table of terrain here, which is going to affect how the combat's going to start and what benefits you're going to get. Can you go and find something for choke points or outflanking people? Personal challenges. What are you trying to achieve in the battle? Is it just to get them to flee the battle? Is it to capture someone or capture a particular place? You then get your stirring speech, your brave heart, stand at the front, or King Theoden in Lord of the Rings. I would also encourage the players actually to make that speech if you can get away with it. You'll then get into engagement. Retiring from combat is just how the player's going to leave. Do you retire from combat victorious, or do you retire from combat running as fast as you can because most of your unit has been beaten to death? And then just details of the aftermath. We're then it's going to talk you through running the combats, condition to the units, like things like broken, disrupted, engaged. Very much feels like it's based around all those 90s and 2000s big epic war games that you could buy with all the units and stuff that I used to play way before Steam came out on the PC. That none of the titles spring to mind, but it very much feels like those. You're going to be doing morale checks to see if they can stay there. And this is the bit about character injuries, which is quite funny. How you could end up being just in the middle of the combat and then injured. And then any sort of rewards you're going to get if you win. It's going to take you through your actions that you can take, fatigue, firing missiles, etc. And then finally, we've got the 2-page table of the actions the players can take. So, things like divide, which it's got no restrictions. You can just get into that. Allows close order troops to briefly split apart, permanently less maneuverable, or stopping charging units. And then we've got, let's just look shake, which is critical only. So once they're in the critical stage, requires the enemy formation to pass an unopposed morale check at 1 difficult grade, harder than it's currently suffering, to become shaken. So you're trying to sort of stop them running off. Mythic Britain is the cool section. I love reading stats for NPCs, especially important NPCs. So here we've got Arthur, the bastard son of Arthur Pendragon. Then got Merlin, which the funny thing is that, if they've got stats, you can potentially you could kill them. I mean, you might have a tough time with Merlin. We've got Guinevere here, the most beautiful lady in Britain at the time. So the legends go. Morgana, the daughter of Arthur Pendragon and her dark magic. Then variety of the knights, as well as the Round Table, as well as Arthur's first wife here. Is it Ladwin's? Is that how it's pronounced as well? And Galwain is players going to need to go and find him in one of the adventures coming up. Just before we get onto the campaign, I'll just show you here. So we've got a typical warrior and a typical bard. So this page here is the page that you're going to need for quite a few of the sort of battles and the NPC characters and things like that. So when the players are going to be fighting some of it will refer back to the main Mythras book, but other sections in here, it will sort of say use the typical spearman stats or whatever it may be, like the bard or the skald. So these are the stats in here for you to find, okay? Actually, it is linked. It actually is linked and hyperlinked backwards and forwards. And that is it. We are now into, from here on in, for Games Masters only. The rest of the book comprises of 7 linked scenarios in the form of a Mythic Britain campaign. So if you're a player, time to leave. If you're a Games Master and you want to run this, you can stay. But don't worry, I am not going to take you through another 150 pages of books, because what it does here is it gives you this brilliant synopsis of the adventure. So initially, the players will go through the Winter Council all the way through to Gellen's Horn, Promises Broken, Logris Burning, the Caves of the Sursind, I think, Galvin's Children, and Suppose Your Time Were to Come to Die. But this basically will just take them through the initial bit where, so the characters journey in Emmet and witness Arthur's call to arms for the tribes of Britain. They're then going to quest for the 13 treasure begins for the characters leaving the journey to an occupied city. They'll then return to Daemonia, where the characters will find themselves in the middle of a conspiracy in the name of 2 major figures. They must make decisions that will shape the destiny of the Alliance of Britain. Then we got the Logris Burning, which Arthur is going to basically do a big Saxon battle, and this is the scenario that is going to allow you to use the Britain at War mass combat rules. Merlin is then going to send them back up north to go and find one of the treasures. Once they get back, one of the Saxon warlords has taken over the lands to the south coast. They will be dealing with that, and then finally, with a major attack imminent from the Saxons, Daemonia sends some of its people to the safety of Powys. And then finally, Suppose Your Time Were to Come. So this is with the major Saxon attack coming in. So it's one of those campaigns where you could play a Saxon, but you just have to be a little bit careful on how you tell people what's going on. So it's very much based for Celts. Let me just sort of show you how the adventure's set out. So again, more art. You've got different rumours and things you expect here. We've got Guinevere here that they're going to meet or see very early on. They are going to be introduced to Arthur, Morgana very early and sort of see how the council works before they're sent out on the missions. Some of them will have maps. There are no separate maps with this, so if you're going to be running this and you want to use maps, there's no reason why you can't just print the 1 pages off, so you can sort of have them to hand as a Games Master, just stick them behind your screen, or depending on whether you're running any sort of BTT. But a lot of the key NPCs, as you can see, let me just scroll back quickly, are included. So the additional people that the sort of more named NPCs are in here, but I did show you where to go and pick up the sort of NPCs. But I'd see if I can find one actually, because as I go through, it should say, if you need the stats for so and so, it links it through. Obviously on the physical copy of the book, it doesn't link, but so you've got all these links here, so which would just take you through the different sections. But I like this. It gives you all the different units and stuff and what's put in. And there used to be a computer. Richard Hammond used to do it. It was on something like BBC Two in the 90s, where they used to take normal people and run them through computer software, and they had to try and replicate battles of Hastings and stuff. It was a really good TV show that my mates and I applied to get on, but needless to say, we didn't get our time. But so it's a really well laid out campaign, but you don't even need it. And here we go. This is the Isle of Wight. The worst holiday I ever went on, according to my parents. They hated the Isle of Wight. I remember enjoying it, but my dad hated it. Apparently, never understood what went on. But this is going to take them the length and breadth of Britain. So if you want your players to go out and just explore the whole of Britain in a wonderful epic 7-parter, And then finally, we're going to get a Mythic Britain character sheet here, right at the back of the book, which is cool because you don't always get specific character sheets for settings in books. So that's it. That is the full 364 pages epic Mythic Britain, which just go and buy it. If you're a fan, like I am, of Dark Ages Mythic Britain, you're going to love this. And even if you don't want to run the campaign, I think the information that you're going to get from the front of the book that I've kind of flown through, I appreciate I flew through all the geography sort of settings and the tribal settings because I could have been there for a long time. There's so much detail in here, both historic and a little bit sort of mysterious, because it's done in that way. You know, it's called Mythic Britain. It's very it's very low fantasy, but it does have that wonderful magic Arthurian feel to it, which is exactly what I was looking for in this. I wasn't really sure where it was going to go. The back of the book sounds very interesting. The spiel that you read, because that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to sell you the book, and I'm glad I've got this. I do this on all the videos. I can't wait to get this run. I need more time, I don't need more time. I just need less full-time job to get things like this run. But we were talking about this on my Discord backwards and forwards, and it's because people on my Discord are aware that this review is coming, and they've been like, we should get a campaign going. And I think I've now managed to, after Christmas, I need to make a decision on what I'm going to be doing on Monday nights, on whether I run something every other Monday. And I think, I've got 3 or 4 things, but definitely this is going to come to the forefront because Mythras combat is absolutely amazing. And so I love Arthurian legend, and I love what has been put in this. So next up, obviously for Mythras, it's going to be these. So Lawrence has said that he's going to send me a couple of books. So once they land, I'm not going to say which ones they are, but they're very exciting as well. But I'd say Mythras is a game, say I've avoided it for a while because, I just didn't look at it. Go and buy Mythras. It's a really good book. Go and get this. And let's see what America does and the Logris book does, because if they're anything like this, they're going to be instantly up there as some of the best books in my collection. Okay, so that's my final thoughts on Mythic Britain, but there is more. And what there is if you go through to TTRPG, you can also pick up this Mythic Britain Companion. So this comes in, it's about £3.50, so it's about $5, and it's a 22-page companion that's going to give you a little bit more details. It's going to give you some additional maps and some additional content for Mythic Britain as well. So let's just show you what's included. The book's going to open up with details of 2 different cults. The first one is Mythras. So Mythras is a warrior cult, and during Roman times it was reserved for male only. However, it's absolutely fine for either sex to join now. It's going to just take you through the organisation, where the leaders hold, what you do to become an initiate, how you join it, and the duties you're going to have while you're there, and then some new combat traits and some secret techniques. And then you've got the cult of Sabrina, which is a cult that embraces the 3 gods specifically, Sabrina herself, Avok, and Mordon, but also encompasses the countless spirits of the sea, streams, and lakes that are all across Britain. Like the cult of Mythras, it's going to sort of take you through the organisation, what you do as initiates, of ultimately becoming a priestess, and then it's going to give you some example of some of the spirits that they follow, from the river spirits and the great river spirits. You're also going to get this location here. I think it's Bryn Neck is how it's possibly pronounced, which is a sort of small farming settlement, which is just, as you can see to the map here, which is just north of the Great Wall. So it's going to give the players another location. You could start them here, or you can even build this in if you don't want to do the main campaign as well. And then you're going to get 4 colour maps of Britain. So you've got the kingdoms and places, the main map here, again all broken out into the different tribal areas as well, and then finally the specific places, and then finally the sacred places. So these are actually in the main core rulebook, but I think they look a lot nicer in colour as well. So yeah, that is what you're going to get if you decide you want to go and grab the companion, because as I always say on this, more is always better. So if you've enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching.